Partners, I'm going to get this wrong now, Partnership for Change, where she is promoting social entrepreneurship and corporate responsibility. If you were here again this morning, we talked about the Aung San Suu Kyi World Freedom Fund that she has started, and she is very, very active in empowering women in various aspects of life, including business. Next to her is Susan Sorensen Langer, who is a founder and principal of Mosaic Mindshare. And she is involved with strategic planning and relationship building, primarily in nonprofit and women-owned business sectors. She is also consulting for Partners in Food Solutions, which is a nonprofit organization that was started by a collaboration between General Mills, Cargill, and DSM, which is doing a lot of wonderful work in developing countries with incorporating and teaching sustainable agricultural and food growing practices. So we're very excited to have Susan here to share her expertise in the nonprofit area. And next to her is Edna Ogwangi, who is with us from Land O'Lakes. And Edna is originally from Kenya, but now describes herself as a Kenyan American after living here for 17 years and going to school here. She is in the International Project Management Specialist with Land O'Lakes, implementing assistance to underdeveloped and developing countries. So our panel today is going to be discussing business models of empowerment, corporate responsibility, and social entrepreneurship. And each one of these women brings a passion for working with women, empowering women, and assisting them in various aspects of business. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ingrid, who will be our moderator for the panel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't know how many of you are aware that today is International Girls' Day. So congratulations. I think this day has been, can we say inaugurated? I use English words wrong, I think, but made as a day to raise the awareness of the need to empower women, or not women, but girls. We have the Women's Day, but this is the Girls' Day. And I think we should raise awareness of that day, because it's so important to remember the role that girls have to play and should play, and the number of girls that aren't being able to play that role. And that's not only a pity for them, it's a great loss for the world, and for especially the developing world. More than 100 million children are out of school, and 70% of those children are girls. Every seventh girl in the poor countries is married before she's 18. And 1 out of 4 give birth before they are 18. And no, not before 18, but before 15. And 1 out of every 4 girls give birth before 18. And 3 out of every 5 poor person in the world are women. And as we talked about earlier this morning, we own 1% of the planet, and we do 70% or 60% of the work. And we also know, as we have talked about, that around less than 20% of the members of parliament in the world are women. And knowing that a huge part of that, the women in parliament are in our side of the world, although there are countries that we learned today that have quite a high degree of women, it's a very low ratio of women in parliament. And that is also a pity, because the decisions made will be focusing very much on men, especially in the third world. And at the same time, we know, and I'm sure that my panel participants here will talk about the same, that we know if you invest in a girl, she will do the rest. So it's really important to strengthen and empowering the women and the girls by investing in their education, creating jobs, and help them create jobs also. I'm sure you will also talk about that. I have been extremely impressed by the power and strength of those women, especially in Africa, where I have seen most of it. The women that really do things that go out of their boundaries, they are so powerful and so strong that you can really bow your head. I've never seen anything in Norway like that. So it's really important that we help these women get to use their power. And we know also that when a woman earns money in the third world, 70% of that income she gets goes back to the family to raise her children, to give them education, whereas for the men, that's somewhere between 30 and 40%. And we also know that women care more about the environment. When they work, when they produce agricultural products, they are more concerned about the long-term quality of the soil, the long-term effect on the planet. And in short, if you know about Vision 2050, I don't know how familiar that is here. Vision 2050 was made by 200 of the largest companies in the world, creating the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. What they have done is they make a vision for what is the world going to look like in 2050 if we don't do major changes. What they say is that if we keep the present level of innovation and the present level of development of population, etc., we will need 2.5 planets in 2050. And that's serious. And this is not something that some politicians or some activists said. This is the 200 of the largest businesses in the world. So this is research based. There is nobody who can say that, well, I don't really believe it. This is the truth. And we need to do something because we also know that we don't have 2.5 planets in 2050. So it's really important. And they say they have made a vision. I really recommend you to go in and look at it on the web. They have made a vision where they say how is it possible for us to reach a level where from today that within 2050 we have created a world where we can all live well and within the limits of our planet. So they see that it's not only reducing the level of use of resources, but it's also making sure we all live well in this planet. And they have said one of the most important things, they call it one of the must-haves within the next 5 to 10 years, is to have empowered the women of the world. And this is interesting. This comes from the 200 largest businesses in the world. So how can we do that? How can we create empowerment that is needed for the women to help create a better world? There are many ways of doing this. We have the traditional philanthropy where we give grants, and there's a continuum of between the grants and the investments, where you have patient money, where you have giveaway money, and finally ordinary business-based investments with a social view called impact investment. And projects that I have been working with are everything from just grants to schools for girls, a project called the Blue Cow. The Blue Cow is a project where Norwegian farming woman just decided, I see that if I give a cow to a person in Uganda, she will save her whole family and she can have her family educated. So what she started, this is an artist she doesn't have much income at all. She has less than she needs to live by herself, but she has managed to invest in 3,000 women's cows. And one cow costs around $500. She has managed to do that by going around asking women to, instead of wishing birthday presents, you can have a cow with your name with some woman in Uganda. So there is Miss Susan, Miss Edna, Miss everything. And these cows, they have changed the lives of all. So this is one, everybody can do something. And from there on, you can go, one of the major Swedish business industrialists, called Percy Barnevik, you might have, I don't know if he ran one of the huge international company, traveled all around the world during his career. And what he saw was that he saw that the poverty was so unnecessary, and he saw that it was so much hurting the women. So when he left his office, he started an organization called Hand in Hand with what he said that his aim was to give about 1 million women a job. He has reached about 600,000 now. What he's doing is he goes into a city, a village, and he just rolls out the plan, training the women in giving them microfinance loan, training them in savings, and then training them in how to start a business. Some of these businesses are small, some are huge after a while, but the basic thing is he says, I need to do it big scale. But I think both of these two are important. So one single woman raising 3,000 and one industrialist raising 600,000 jobs, it's all important. And in between we have, I'm sure you know of Acumen Fund, which is an American-based fund that goes in investing as a venture philanthropist, but as venture investment. It's only that they have much more patience in terms of getting the money back, and they have a very big focus on what kind of business they go into, and they don't expect a return of 25%. They expect a return of getting the money back. And that has now created several 100,000 jobs, investing $78 million in businesses that help create a better society. So there are, and this was started by a girl investment banker, Jacqueline Novogratz, whom I'm sure some of you know of. And these are various ways of using the business model to create a better situation for women. So with this in mind, we can see that there are so many ways of doing it. And I think it's very important to be creative, think business-wise, because social change can only happen long-term and on a good scale if there is a financial fundament in it and sustainability in it long-term, because we cannot keep giving. And giving is not the best way of helping. It's more making people more needy. So investing and using the business model to think is the only way, I think, that you can really long-term help. And on the other hand, business must understand that if you don't use your social thinking, and if you don't create shared value with your business, it's not going to sustain long. Because if you don't have a market that's able to buy your products, you won't sustain. So business needs to think socially, and social activities need to think in a business way of thinking. So with this as an introduction, I will ask maybe if you, Susan, could explain, talk to us a little about the project you're doing in Mosaic Mindshare.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm very honored to be up here sitting next to you, and with Edna, I'm humbled. I feel a little bit challenged here because there's an intimidation factor here. I think you're much more experienced than I am. I can speak a little bit to some of the issues related to Partners in Food Solutions, but my passion really is about women and connecting women in the United States and women with influence and affluence and action with women in need, whether it be here in the United States or in the developing world. But Partners in Food Solutions was created. It's a brilliant, brilliant idea that came together. Ken Powell was he was participating in the World Economic Forum, and I think back in 2007, and the Secretary General of the UN was Kofi Annan at the time, and they had some dialogue between the two of them, and Mr. Annan had asked Ken Powell, so what are you doing to feed the poor and feed the rest of the world? And you know, Ken thought about that. What is that really a Minneapolis-based organization could really do in Africa? What really could we do in the developing world? And so he came back and he challenged his executive team and said, we really need to come up with something that uses our knowledge and expertise and how we can make that connection and make a difference for creating quality, nutritious, affordable, safe food in Africa. So his team got together and they tried a few initiatives, but they landed on Partners in Food Solutions, which then came together. They invited Cargill and the Royal Dutch DSM organization. It's a food fortification company. It's huge. And they have gotten together now and they tap into the knowledge and expertise of their volunteer skilled employees to help and assist small and growing food processors in East Africa. Currently, they're in 4 countries, and they're now helping out approximately 40 small and growing businesses, food processors. We've had, I think, 80 projects to date that we've been working on, and there's over 500 volunteers in just a year. It was launched officially back in June of 2011. And it's really interesting to talk to some of the volunteers that they say just a little bit of their knowledge and expertise can go such a long way. There's a gentleman, his name is Barmac Rossi, and he's an engineer with General Mills, and he worked with a company in Malawi on improving the quality of their food. And he traveled to Africa. Most of the consulting, though, is remote, over the phone, Skyping, email, very little travel over to Africa. Well, Barmac traveled over there, and he met with this group of people, and it was just in I think, the amount of time that they were cooking the vegetables and at what temperature. And he said it took literally a matter of minutes to discover this. And now they've extended the capacity of what that plant can provide to their local farmers. The other genius within the Partners in Food Solutions model is that it requires the small and growing businesses that it works with to purchase 60% of its raw materials and products locally. And that's then from the smallholder farmers, which we know are primarily women. So when Jeff Dykstra, who's the executive director, the founding executive director of Partners in Food Solutions, invited me to join in and consult with him on this business, I was delighted, because anything and everything I do till I take my last breath is going to be about how to help women help themselves and help their families. I had traveled to Africa in 1995 with an organization called World Vision, and we were just a group of 13 people, and I didn't know any of them. And I was sharing with Edna earlier that we traveled to a small town in Kenya, and we met with this woman, and she shared we just said, "What is your day like? Just give us an example of your day." And by the time she was done, I couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I was just sobbing. And she said she gets up early in the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, and she prepares breakfast for her husband, and then he goes out into the field and pretty much just sits there or plays games or whatever. And during her day, she thatches the roof, she goes and picks the vegetables that she's going to cook that evening, and she does the repairs and fetches water. She and her daughter traveled miles to go fetch some water, and it usually was not clean water, so she'd have to cook it and boil it. And then she would prepare the meal, and she would serve first her husband, then she would serve her children, and if there was something left over, she would eat that. Then she would have to clean up after the meal, and we chuckled, Edna and I chuckled when I shared with her, and then she has to entertain her husband. And if she doesn't entertain her husband, then she could be beaten. And when I started thinking about, and I feel terrible even telling the story because you're much more equipped to tell the story authentically, but as a woman who's lived somewhat of a privileged life that I have choices and options given to me every single day, this woman did not have any of those. And she still had this beautiful spirit about her. She had the sense of hospitality to us. She had joy. She extended everything that she had. She cooked us a meal. I mean, it was just incredible, and to think that she had to live this life every single day. So she became my focus in my heart, and it broke every day, but I was challenged then to say, I'm coming back. I have a responsibility to do something that would equip and empower women. And I learned, like you were saying, Ingrid, about the education. Every woman that gets educated, she now has more opportunities that are her way, but she also has respect. She gains respect from her husband, from her family, and from her community. She is a healthier woman. She has, she'll have fewer children. She'll have more opportunities, and if you then give her skills training so that she can learn a skill and then earn some income, she then has more opportunities again. And then if she starts her business and gets a loan for microfinance, then she can build that business and start hiring people, and she can send her children to to school. But then, after she grows her business, she needs that mentoring. So that's where the corporations, I think, like Partners in Food Solutions with General Mills and Cargill and DSM and any other corporations that want to join in, come into play. They really need to have that expertise that helps them go that next level. And so I'll share one story quick about Mary, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Mary is a woman that Ken Powell and the chairman and CEO of General Mills and Jeff Dykstra and Peter Erickson, who heads up their ITQ, Innovation, Technology, and Quality at General Mills, they met this woman, Mary, and she told them her story. And she came home from work. She was a secretary, and she came home from work one day, and she was just tired, and she needed to put dinner on the table for her family, and she went to the freezer, and she actually had a freezer, and she had frozen beans in there. So she cooked up the beans really quick, and she fed her family, and she thought, I wonder if this is a business idea. Could this possibly be a business idea? So she gathered some cookbooks from some friends. Apparently she didn't have any cookbooks, and she went to the grocery store, and she asked to meet the receptionist if she could meet with the store manager. She met with the store manager and said, how can I get a product into your store? And he said, well, do you have the papers? And she said, what papers? I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done business before. And he said, you need to have papers. Once you have papers, you come back to me. And she said, no, I want you to tell me every single thing that I need to do. I'm not leaving here until you tell me what I need to do in order to start this business and get a product in your store. So he sat down with her and did this. And she got the business papers together, and she created this product. And now it literally is sitting in these stores. They gave her a test pilot in two branches for 60 days. And before the 60 days were up, all the branches within this store that's like a Walmart, Jeff says. It's like the Walmart of Africa. I don't know the name of it, but it's in Kenya. And they were all asking for this product. Well, now she's in all of their stores, and her husband is involved in the business and her 3 daughters. And she said what was the turning point for her was when she saw how proud her daughters were of her. And she taught them that anything that you do of any value takes hard work. You need to work hard. And so Partners in Food Solutions works with Mary now to build capacity, to do quality control, financial planning. And now she has affordable products, and she buys all of her materials from local smallholder farmers, which of course are women. I think that I've said enough now.
I want to just have, I'll ask a question about Mary, because isn't she very typical that when she goes into the store and she's told, well, you need all the papers, and then normally you would say, well, I'll go out again, and starts wondering what kind of papers did he talk about. But having that strength and requiring to get all the information from a man who was probably not very interested in giving the information.
I think what I have learned, and many of us that have traveled to the developing world about women, is that they're resourceful. They do not take no for an answer. And if you think of what they have to balance during a day that I described with this other woman, it's incredible, and it's not no. I mean, if you look at a woman, she is the bearer and carers of our children. She is the ultimate share of information. So a woman is going to take what she learns and what she knows, and she is going to then share it with her family. And I think there's a Ghanaian proverb that says, you educate a man and you have educated an individual, you educate a woman, you educate a family and a nation. That's how it goes, and I think that's how she is going to be for her children. She won't take no for an answer.
No, good. Edna, could you talk a little about what you're doing in Land O'Lakes?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. And really, the story that we've heard from Susan and Ingrid isn't different from the story that I'm going to tell you about. But Land O'Lakes, for most people know Land O'Lakes as a cooperative or a business based in Minnesota. All they know about it is butter or milk, and maybe the story ends there, but Land O'Lakes does more than that. They have a whole division that really does international development work, and really the reason why we do that, when small farmers here in the Midwest sat down and wanted to group themselves collectively so that they could market their produce, that's the same thing that Land O'Lakes farmers wanted to help farmers abroad. So they decided to start an international program where they could work with farmers abroad back in 1981. And this was technical expertise, farmer to farmer. A farmer from Midwest works with a farmer in Africa to show them the expertise that they have learned, they know here, and how they could improve that. But it started so small that people thought that, well, it's going to be a year, then we are done. But this is 2012, and we are still working with farmers in Africa, in Asia, and before then we were working in Eastern Europe. Why does Land O'Lakes do that? If it was just to make money, maybe they could have already left. But they have that sense of dignity. They see you, they value human beings. They see the value of uplifting the poor and making sure that those who are underprivileged, those who cannot meet their needs, can be able to be lifted up a little bit and just be the same as the farmer in Midwest, in Iowa, or in Nebraska, or Minnesota itself. That's the short story of Land O'Lakes itself. Now, how do I come into place? How does a Kenyan woman come to Land O'Lakes, Minnesota, and work with farmers here and maybe take that expertise in Africa? I'm just one of the many success stories that Land O'Lakes has in place. Before I came to Land O'Lakes, I was really working with my parents at home, and actually what I did is to help them milk cows. But then I got a scholarship, came to Michigan State, and I did my program. In Kenya per se, like what Susan said, women are really the backbone of agriculture. They think of how to improve the standard of living for their families. Men do just think singularly, it's them. But women think, and most of the women back there are not so much learned, but they have one desire. They never went to school, yes, but they want their daughters to go to school. They want their daughters to go to higher levels. If they only went to K through 8, they want their daughters to go through high school or even to grade, college and get, master's program. That is a desire for every woman. And I know very well that is the desire of most women even here. All the desires that we share are not different, they are similar. So my story comes in as, well, I'm in the United States, I'm working for Land O'Lakes, but I never forgot where I came from. I remember that the lady who took care of me really needed that help, and I need to pass that inspiration to other women in Africa. So when I work for Land O'Lakes, there's one thing that I think of. How do I alleviate the problems that we have in Africa? How can I work with both men and women, but more so, how do I share these stories and go back and see how we can help? What does Land O'Lakes really do in Africa, per se? We have several projects, actually, to mention about 26 projects, and most of those projects, really, 80% are women-led projects. And we've chosen that deliberately, not because men are not really interested in agriculture, they are. But we find that when we start working with women, the projects are more sustainable. They are business-oriented. They look at things that they want to perceive for the future. They look at things that, how can we help people collectively? And then there's that element of peace and food security in that place. Because when men gang and get money, we like some social aspect. So the first thing men think of is let's have some happy hour. But women, the first income they get, they go back and think about, how about buying that school uniform for my daughter or my son? How about buying food for my children? How about investing? And maybe not only just getting my little money, having a women's group and having a collateral to get that, because it's so hard to get loans as a woman in Africa. Everything is tied to your husband. You need permission to even get a passport. I usually make fun of my husband, saying, you know what? The one right that I have in the United States is I can own my own passport without you signing it. But in Kenya, you cannot have a passport without your husband endorsing it. So it has given us the voice that we need. It has given us, the liberty that we need to sustain and not also sustain to be very viable in businesses. Some of the activities that we work as Land O'Lakes works with women in Africa is to make sure that we promote leadership among women. Why do we do that? We know that we need that representation in every democratic state. We need men, both men and women, to be active participants in every discussion and decision making, because there are women needs that men cannot really discuss about. So we need that representation. Most of the Africa, I'll give you an example in Kenya, it's mandated now with the new constitution that with every decision maker on the table, 30% of those have to be women. It's a step forward. We want to promote that and continue working with the government of Kenya to do that. Because when women are seated on the table, they represent women's needs, whether they're economical needs, social needs, educational needs, and even democratic needs. Democracy is key for that peace to come. Then, when all that is gathered, we have food security around it. We also involve women into businesses. Linking businesses, productivity is great. Farming is good. But if you get the produce and you don't have markets to sell, really you don't get enough of income back home. So we do collective marketing. We make sure that our women groups collectively work together, get their produce together, try to negotiate the costs of the prices of those goods that they are selling. Because we've realized one voice really doesn't make a lot of noise. But you have many collective voices. They are able to have a seat on that bargaining table because they are able to say, well, all these groups, we collect, for example, the milk collection centers that we have, but what is the price that this processor is giving us? I think we should do better than the price. And when you have more people on the table, making sure that their voices are heard, usually the processors that we work with sit down and get a contract and they get better prices. The other thing that we really work closely with farmers in Africa, from farmers here in Minnesota, is connecting those farmers, as I said, farmer-to-farmer programs, making sure there's that tie, that the expertise is, okay, how do I raise this cow? How do I make sure that my crop yield is increasing? So we know, maybe in Kenya technology is behind a little bit, but we've noticed technology is coming up. There's cell phones, there's Skype. Connecting the linkages between women here and women abroad is really key. Last year, we were able to bring one of our successful women from Kenya to come and actually present and show some successes that women have achieved in Kenya. And she was in Iowa last year at the World Food Prize, giving that presentation, explaining how important it is to work together from the Western culture through the Eastern culture and the South. Why is that important? It's because we want to show those successes that it can work. Distance can be there, but women here in the Midwest or women in Europe, United States, wherever they are, have the same aspirations. They have the same desires. They have the same goals. And ultimately, they want to improve their lives. When we are seated here, when I'm here, I think of my mother, I think of my aunt, and I think of the sisters that I have that, I'm here, I want to improve the lifestyle that I have, but really, I still have a piece of a puzzle to solve in Africa. And I can bring that bridge and say, you can do it. If I can do it from here, and the women in the United States are willing to help, That's really the goal of everything that we have. And I think it's key, as we are all seated here, to think about, what each one of us can do to help alleviate poverty, help, at least today is the Girls' Day. How can we improve the education of those children who are really lack that education, children who only have one meal a day, children who actually don't know whether they will survive in the next 5 years, and how can we be able to connect the dots that we are missing here and how we can move forward.
Very good. I have a question for you. Knowing the work that the Blue Cow does in Norway, what the lady who started that has seen is that it not only changed her life, she became a much happier woman. She brings, when she sees friends that are miserable, having nervous breakdowns or having trouble with their family lives or whatever, she brings them down to Uganda and helps them give a cow away. And it changes their lives. They get a sister down in Uganda and all of a sudden they see, wow, I can make a difference, and their whole life is changed. Do you see any of that with the farmers here?
Exactly, and that's what really motivates what I do, because there's that, exchange of ideas. People seeing how they are, especially women seeing how their fellow women lives are changing. One of the things that we have is we have also a heifer program in most of the projects that we have, that where you get a cow, but the promise is that you need to pass on the heifer for another woman to benefit. And that has really worked in a project that I worked in Malawi, which is really near dear to me. Malawi is one of the poorest countries in Africa. And one of the reasons we went there, tobacco was really key. But kids were not going to school. And women said, if I can only have even a goat, or if I can only have they were not thinking big. When we started distributing that, the cows, the way the woman from the story you told us about, it kind of changed the life and the perspective, not only having the milk that they are using at home, they were able to sell extra milk in the market and get the milk back. But also getting the women to go and showcase, that's really key. People like to see, then they believe what's working. We usually get women to go actually visit other farmer women. And that's what we call farmer field schools. They go and check and even have a weekend. It's almost like a weekend out. And they see and say, well, if Ingrid can actually do this farming, I think I can do that. Why is it that she's very successful? She has the same climatic conditions that I do. I need to get the skills and ask her how she's been working so hard, what can I improve, what technical expertise do I need to have, then I can improve. So that exchange of ideas has really worked, and it's really a wildfire.
Good. And Susan, I would like to ask you about the companies that are in Partners in Food. What does it mean for the employees that they're doing this work?
I think it's really interesting to see the various employees that have gotten involved. I think there's different motivations when they start to get involved, but there hasn't been one volunteer that I've met with that has not been transformed in the process. I shared with you about Barmac, and at one time when we were doing the vision and mission and strategy for partners, we had a creative session, and we had each one of the key stakeholders to create a collage that represented, who is Partners in Food Solutions, and who do we, who's our target audience, and what are the benefits, and what's the legacy we want to leave behind. And Barmac's collage was just mind-blowing. It was this beautiful assortment of things, but in the center of it was a light box. He said Partners in Food Solutions is like a light box, and he had these arrows going out to these different aspects, the volunteers, the smallholder farmers, the food processors, and it was extraordinary, because what he said was, when we come together, there's this beautiful light and exchange of ideas and energy, and so that is a slice of what one volunteer, but they all have that same, and they're committed. Once they get involved and they get on a project, they don't let go. So.
And do you think that has, I guess this is a leading question, but I lead it. Does it have an impact on their work on their ordinary work in the companies?
Interesting that you say that. I know for a fact that these people that are now involved together, that they didn't work together maybe necessarily at General Mills or at Cargill, but now they're teams and they're doing things, they're cross-functioning types of teams. It builds a relationship and trust. Somebody was talking about trust earlier today, that's a cornerstone for all of us. And I think in the corporate environment too, building trust and especially in some of these economic downturns, that having a relationship and doing things outside of the office and volunteering and doing social type of endeavors, that reinforces those relationships and their contribution to the organization. Because as we know too, we sometimes go over there and we say that we're going to serve them and we're going to bring our expertise and how we're going to help them. But the reality is, and I think that anybody that's ever done this before realizes that when you go over and you give and you are supporting someone, you actually are the one that's changed and you're transformed. I think one of the things that we need to institute into Partners in Food Solutions in our training program with the volunteers is some cross-cultural education and training, really to help them understand when you go in, you have to understand the culture and meet them where they're at and listen with an open ear and open heart. Because sometimes if you want to give a family a cow, you want to give them that cow, but really they don't have the ability to care for that cow, so really they need a goat, if you're talking about goats. And so understanding what that context is so that you're not, do no harm.
Yeah, I think that's a very important issue, that do no harm, because you can really also create some problems between the neighbors.
Oh, absolutely.
Any questions from the audience? I see there is a hand up there. Yeah. And then there's afterwards this gentleman up there.
Thank you. So I'm a student at the Humphrey School, and I was wondering if the different organizations that all of you work with have you worked on any projects where you started working, you actually implemented the project and then handed it over to the local people, and it's been sustaining on its own without the say the organization that actually started the project having to still be there at the at the root level?
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good question. And actually, when we go to these projects or countries, our end goal is to create sustainability. That is really the key goal. We can go and provide relief sometimes or create development, but our end goal is to create that impact investments. The answer is yes. We have several projects that we have actually closed down, and they are continuing to make money, in that the groups, the cooperatives that we work with continue to do business, and actually they are now in the next level, dealing with sustainable businesses and employing people locally. And that's really usually our goal. When we work, obviously, we have funded Land O'Lakes itself. If I might go back, the division that I work in is funded by the US government, which is USAID or USDA. And both of them, they are always humanitarian, but also behind the scenes have development goals, that we kind of have a bridge. When we help the countries or the beneficiaries or stakeholders in those countries, the end goal is always how viable will these projects be, how sustainable. And we have to develop a sustainability plan. That we don't have to do a lot of handouts, and we do hand-holding when we start, but with a mind of economic sustainability. And that goes hand in hand with what we do. And yes, we do have several projects. We had a couple in Asia, and actually we don't get continual funding. Once that we've reached the goal, we continue. Land O'Lakes pulls out, and the groups continue working.
Not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of management, because I'm from India, and I've seen in a lot of places in the countryside, there are NGOs that come in, and the NGOs literally run the village. And what happens when that one person or that one NGO leaves?
Absolutely. And that was a previous model in that, people depended on NGOs, they are coming, and they're helping us, and then without that sustainability plan. Now, as we get into development, the one key aspect of our development work is to have that sustainability plan in mind. What is our exit strategy? How are we going to leave these groups surviving? Because if we have a model of going and not giving them a plan on how they will survive after we've left, we've actually failed and it's dead on arrival. One thing we need, and all NGOs need to take away, is the groups that we work with overseas or in developing countries, really, they are willing to do well and to sustain themselves. But you need to develop those strategies for them to continue. Those are the tools that they need. How we develop the tools is really key. If you only have a mindset of helping them without creating those tools and developing the innovative tools for sustainability, and they have to be appropriate for that culture, for that country. You cannot take a jumbo jet or an A330 where you know it will not work. So you have really to customize. And remember, one size does not fit all. We are not boxed in. People are very different. So you have to bring the creativity into mind, and actually involving those beneficiaries is key. Ownership is really key. The top-down policy doesn't work. You need to get the locals on the process. Do the needs assessment and agree on what is going to work. Because most of the time, and sometimes some of the projects that I worked in, we have ideas that really work here in the United States, but when you go on the ground, they might not work. And you'll find the local people, because they need help, they will not object. They will sit in, they will never say no. Obviously, that is a place where you need to invite those stakeholders and do a round robin and say, what do you think? Do you think this aspect of this ideology or this option is going to work with you guys? And give them an open mind, an open ear, so that they can respond back. That's why we've realized top-down really policies never work. They might work short-term, but not long-lasting.
I think, do you want to comment on that?
I would just really quickly, I agree, ditto, with Edna. For Partners in Food Solutions, there's a unique component that we have. We have an implementing partner on the ground, TechnoServe, and we have a position that's called translators. And those translators really are understanding, they're listening with what Edna was talking about to what is the context from which their needs really are. So they're translating from the field to the volunteer, the skilled volunteers of what really is the issue and what their needs are. So then when they come back and say, oh, this is what we need to do, they go back there. We have different levels of projects that we work on in organizations. So it might be someone that we call a gazelle, which is a high capacity, a little bit larger, small and growing business, and they need a little bit long-term, more higher level consulting, versus a project for a small Mary type of project where you come in and do and go out, but it's always do no harm. How can we help them help themselves? That is the first and foremost approach.
Since there there's one gentleman there first, and then here, and then since there are students here, I don't know if you are aware of the book that called Dead Aid. Yeah, I'm sure you know. Desdemona, she's Kenyan, isn't she?
Yep.
Yeah, Desdemona Mayo. She has written a book about how the traditional aid from the Western world has done a lot of harm by being helpers instead of partners in change. This gentleman over here.
Thank you. I'm Bernard Anderson, professor at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania. but at one point in my career, I was a program director at the Rockefeller Foundation that had major programs in East Africa. I have listened with great interest in the comments that were made, and as I was listening to what you were saying, I was thinking about the current economic condition of Africa. One of the other experiences I've been privileged to have in life was to work very closely with the late Reverend Leon H. Sullivan, who did a lot to bring programs to Africa that were largely funded by the USAID. But my question is this. When you look at the current conditions in Africa, and the reference has been made to the poverty in Africa, Africa as a continent is not making gains. It is falling behind with all of the efforts that have been made through economic aid to Africa. Other than the oil-producing countries and the mineral-producing countries, Africa is falling behind. We've heard references here to interesting micro experiences in Kenya and in, I think you said Mali, Mr. Ogwangi.
Malawi.
Malawi. Those are very encouraging experiences. But I wonder how much good they will do approaching it in a one-on-one basis as you have described. There simply are not enough people like you to go to Africa and have the kind of individual experiences you have had. My question is this: how do you take the experiences that you have just described that apparently have had some positive effect on a one-on-one basis with a woman in this village or a woman in another village? And I agree that a business model in approaching this in a generic sense is probably useful, but how do you replicate those experiences? What institutional forms can you share with us that, in your view, will allow the experiences that you have had, and there are other people who've had these experiences on a one-on-one basis in various countries throughout the African continent, in order to bring this to scale so that it has a greater macro impact in reducing poverty in Africa? Because for all that is done by the private sector, and the private sector in the United States is somewhat more enlightened now than it was 30 years ago when they were looking at Africa, but nonetheless, going at it in the way that you have described strikes me to not make much meaningful or measurable impact in changing the dreadful situation for Africa.
I think this is a very appropriate question, and I think that is what everybody that's now, as you are perfectly aware of, in working within this field are considering how do we make this scale up, because of course helping a village or helping an individual will only help that village or that individual unless you make it scale up. But there are I have hopes in all the institutions that are now working towards scaling up. You have huge founders like the Gates Foundation cooperating with major aid organizations where they really work with scale. You have the Skull Foundation trying to help scale up. What they do is they find individuals that have done something that is effective and smart, and then they replicate it, pouring money into it through their their own foundations and getting other people to do the same. You have Ashoka, who is also doing that, showing, finding good entrepreneurs and helping them scale up, and through franchise models or other ways of scaling. And I think this is what a snowball that is now starting to roll. And I think cooperating with this, that's why I think the word partnership is so important, because while we all need to do the best we cannot do enough unless we partner and work to create the scale. And of course, one American company is huge, but it needs to be even bigger work to get the results. I don't know if you have any comments.
I would just say that in designing partners in food solutions, the idea and the vision is to create a virtuous cycle, to your point. How can we create a multiplier effect? What they've established in their model is a technology, a platform from Salesforce.com, so that we can connect people much more readily. It isn't on a one-on-one basis, but a one-to-many. We also have trainings that we're putting on that bring small and growing businesses into that training that might not have one-on-one project assistance, but they're getting trained on how to do different types of corn soy blend, quality training, all sorts of things. So it is one-to-many. But we tell stories here so that you can see the difference of change on one person's life, I guess.
I want to bring one important point. For any development to occur in Africa, there's one important stakeholder. We have to work with the governments, and the governments have to agree. Right now, I think this morning, whoever was here, you heard about Feed the Future initiative that the US government is introducing. Why they did that is before the US government was giving money to countries without the countries really sitting down and laying down their development goals and being accountable what they're giving. They are also even, the goals that they have to have a financial contribution. They have to be key partners for them to be successful. Some governments in Africa I would say corrupt, others aren't. They are, others are very, they are promoting, democracy, others are not. So there are all those issues that need to be, factored in. But these stakeholders, the governments that we work with, need to understand that it's a partnership between the Western world, the donors who are giving the resources, and for them, they have to play a big role in, improving their policies, which are really key to make sure that those policies align and their economic policies, which are not leading other resources outside the development goal. So for the scalability part of it, we've seen Gates projects, and we collaborate. USAID is now collaborating with Gates Foundation in other projects, because you cannot just work with one farmer to spread the fire. It's going to be difficult. It's going to take ages. We want to make sure that we have a strategy where we can lay down a scalability of mass productivity. How we do that, the governments have to sit down. The donors will also sit down. They are doing that. Right now, last year there was a big meeting in Kenya with CADAP. It's Africa, countries sitting down and laying down structures, improving, seeing the infrastructure that isn't up to par and making sure that they're laying those infrastructures and structures ready for them to develop. So getting that in place is really key for any development to go on.
I appreciate your answer. I have one question. What role do you see for non-foundation, non-governmental service organizations to contribute to the achievement of the goals you have?
I see that as technical or consultancy part of it. We have the technical skills.
As consultants?
Yes.
But not as service providers?
As service providers too, both. there are two areas. They provide the service, but they bring the technical expertise. And actually, that's what even Land O'Lakes brings into the picture. We provide, we are contractors to provide service, to improve the service level. Then we bring that technical expertise that is actually sometimes lacking in those countries, and even improving, empowering the locals, but also you find there are some government structures that are weak. So if it's policy that they need assistance, NGOs will come in and help them improve their policy legislative level of it. Democracy initiatives, that is what NGOs kind of bring on the table and bring all the stakeholders together and actually play that role really well.
Okay, I think we will have to get the lady on the last row there, and then there was a question up here also. Okay.
You started to touch on my question a little bit. Elsie Harper Anderson from Virginia Commonwealth University. I've been hearing a lot about the growth side of economic development, and I've been wanting to hear more about the development side. You started out telling stories about, specifically about women and some of the other issues that are oppressing them and and disempowering them, some of the social, cultural, and you touched on some of the political issues. In order for any growth, even the micro level that's happening, to turn into development, it would seem that some of those social, cultural, and political issues would have to be addressed. And I'm wondering if your organizations are providing that sort of support as well.
Would you want to go into that?
I can say that that General Mills, the partners in Food Solutions, do not get involved in the political end of it. We have a partner, USAID, that is the advocate on that realm of it. Also, our TechnoServe, our partner, implementing partner, would be more from a political advocacy. We don't get involved, to my knowledge, in the politics.
More of what I'm interested in is the social, cultural kinds of things. You talked about how you talked about some of the cultural issues where the women don't go to school and where they don't have literacy, and also the relations between males and females where the women are doing most of the work and that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if that is in fact undercutting their ability to be successful as business owners, and whether that comes into play in your planning for expanding their enterprises and making sure that they're sustainable.
I could answer. I'm involved in a program that might is maybe a better answer for your question. In Ethiopia, we have a program where the oldest women organization in Norway, this is the organization that worked for the voting right in Norway, and it's all the welfare that, or basically all the welfare that we now have in Norway, taken for granted, paid by the state, was actually made by this organization 100 years ago. It's all the women health and the teaching of nurses and rheumatism and all those kinds of things were created by this organization. And we are now going down to Ethiopia, helping them, not building, but helping them build. The women of Ethiopia build their own women health organization based on the learnings from our grandmothers. And this seems to be so far it looks very successful. What we're doing is we're teaching them how the democracy is working in the organization, how it changed the women's role in Norway, and then they see how can they use this for their development. And it turns out that the Secretary General of the Norwegian Foundation, which is a very rich foundation now, with 60,000 members and 1,400 local communities in Norway, her best friend has now become the Ethiopian Secretary General, which is a fantastic woman now working to help develop these organizations around in Ethiopia. And they are working on exactly those social skills first, and then they help them afterwards with the microfinance or whatever that's needed. But this is going from the other angle, and it looks like it's not a very old program. We've been doing it for 3 or 4 years, but it looks like it's quite successful. But I would also say that once you get the economic power, it's easier to take care of the other things. It's what, like the sentence that you always hear, that invest in a woman and she will do the rest. I think that's very often the case.
I really appreciate your question, because sometimes the approach you take can either have unintended consequences. In Africa, most of it is really patriarchal society. I remember back in 1995, when we had the Beijing, the women's world and everything, women came back, they were empowered, but that wasn't really a happy camp for men. To them, it was like a threat. Now you're gonna take over, so what? So the approach we take, because of different cultures, depends on how successful you will be to empower. When we talk about gender rights or gender issues, we are very considerate that men are also involved, so that they can be aware of those issues that underline or what happened, what needs the women have and the desires they do. Because if you just take a one structured way, it will backfire on you in some of the cultures that I know. So it is always important to bring that cultural sensitivity and awareness to both genders, both men and women. And up to a time when they realize, and some cultures, it will take some time. Others, it's very fast. People kind of work together. So having the cultural awareness and men understanding the importance of their wives or women to be economically empowered is really key, so that that development can go hand in hand. Without that, you can really have a backfire situation in some of the countries, and you'll never succeed. So each country is different, each culture is different, and the tactics that we use have to be customized so that you get your successes evolving. Otherwise, the economic empowerment, if you go to, let me giving you an example, Kenya, the tactics we can use in Maasai will be totally different from the central. Knowing that the Maasai own everything, the women are there, they're heard, but they can be seen but not heard. But in the central province, it's different. Women have some opportunities. They have some say. So different cultures, different regions will be, tactics will be applied differently.
Okay, we are at 5, so I think we have to finalize this by thanking for staying here and listening to us. And I hope we've had something to bring to the table. Yeah. Thank you.
I want to thank Ingrid, Susan, and Edna for sharing your knowledge, your insights, and your experiences with us today. I know I am inspired and invigorated by this conversation. I wish we had another hour to continue this, because I think there's so much more that's to be said. But I wanted to let you all know that all 3 of our panelists will be presenting again tomorrow as part of our Dignity and Empowerment seminar, and we will be at the Saturn Auditorium at Augsburg. And so we invite you all to come and hear more from all of our panelists tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.